King Charles III has waited longer than any heir in British history to wear the crown. He was born in November 1948. He became Prince of Wales at the age of 10, formally invested in that title at 20. He watched as the decades passed. He watched as governments came and went, as empires dissolved, as the world reshaped itself around a monarchy that somehow endured. He watched as his marriage collapsed into public tragedy, as his sons grew up and grew complicated. As scandal after scandal tested the institution, he had devoted his entire existence to preparing to lead. And then, finally, in September 2022, at the age of 73, he became king. He had waited 73 years. And now, less than 3 years later, the question being asked inside Buckingham Palace and in the offices of every major royal publication on Earth is not whether King Charles will reign for decades to come. The question is whether his reign will outlast this summer. In March 2026, Radar Online published a report that stopped the royal world in its tracks. A source told their investigative team something that palace insiders had been murmuring for months, but no one had dared to say plainly. King Charles, the source said, remains gravely ill, and as callous as it may sound, it's only a matter of time before things decline. People inside the palace, the source continued, are openly saying Charles should do the right thing and abdicate. And more than that, the wheels of succession, far from being a distant hypothetical, are already turning. Assuming everything goes to plan, the source added, William's coronation could happen as soon as this summer. This summer. Not a decade from now, not in the abstract future that royal succession has always seemed to represent. This summer. If you are settling in to hear the full story of what is happening inside the British monarchy right now, the cancer, the coronation plans, the woman quietly directing every detail, and the remarkable act of institutional courage that may define a reign, then you are exactly where this story needs you to be. Stay with us from beginning to end, because what King Charles III appears to be preparing to do is something that no British monarch has done voluntarily in nearly 90 years. And the way he appears to be doing it may be the most important thing he has ever done. Let us begin, as every honest telling of this story must, with the man at its center. King Charles III was diagnosed with cancer in February 2024. The palace disclosed the diagnosis but did not reveal its specific nature or precise location. A decision that was both characteristically private and, by royal standards, unusually transparent about the fact of serious illness. He began treatment immediately. He stepped back from public engagements. He retreated to Highgrove, his beloved Gloucestershire estate, and, for a time, the world held its collective breath. What happened next surprised many. By the summer of 2024, he had returned to public duties. By the autumn, he was maintaining a schedule that would exhaust a healthy man half his age: state banquets, overseas tours, privy council meetings, audiences with visiting heads of state. He threw himself back into the work with a determination that, depending on whom you ask, was either an inspiring act of defiance or a dangerous act of denial. Then, in December 2025, he appeared in a deeply personal video message for Cancer Research UK, broadcast on Channel 4. As Hello Magazine, E! News, and Harper's Bazaar all reported on December 12th and 13th, the king told the British public something both hopeful and revealing. Thanks to early diagnosis and effective treatment, he said, his schedule of treatment would be reduced in 2026. He spoke with quiet warmth about the importance of early detection and encouraged the public to seek screening. It was a remarkable statement from a sitting monarch. It was the kind of openness that his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, would never have permitted. And to those who understood its significance, it was also something else. It was a man saying, very gently, that he understood the nature of what was happening to him, and that he intended to face it on his own terms. By March 2026, those terms were becoming clearer, and the picture they revealed was not the one the palace had been presenting in public. New Idea magazine, reporting on March 30th, 2026, cited a palace insider saying that King Charles may step aside in a matter of weeks. Courtiers had confirmed that the king was exhausted. A second source told Rob Shooter, the respected royal correspondent and former publicist to Princess Michael of Kent, that the transition would look measured and dignified, and that health provides the most unassailable explanation. Cosmopolitan reported on March 3rd that palace courtiers were openly claiming Charles would abdicate within 12 months. The Royal Observer reported the same day that insiders saw a controlled evolution, not a crisis. And New Idea followed up on March 31st with the most direct headline yet. King Charles abdication. Could William be king by June? The word abdication carries heavy historical weight in Britain. The last time a British monarch voluntarily relinquished the crown was in December 1936, when King Edward VIII chose the woman he loved over the throne he was born to occupy. The abdication crisis of 1936 scarred the monarchy for a generation. It forced a reluctant King George VI, a man with a debilitating stammer and no desire for the crown, onto the throne. It placed the burden of holding the institution together during the Second World War on shoulders that had never expected to bear it. And the word itself became a kind of institutional wound. Abdication was not something kings did. Abdication was what kings did when they failed. What Charles appears to be preparing, if the insider accounts are accurate, is something entirely different in its character. Not a flight from responsibility, but a fulfillment of it. Not a collapse, but a completion. Senior courtier after senior courtier, speaking to Radar Online and to Rob Shooter's Substack newsletter in the weeks leading up to April 2026, used remarkably consistent language. He will not be seen as pushed, one source insisted. He has waited a lifetime for this role. When he steps back, it will be entirely on his terms. Those are not the words of a palace preparing for a crisis. They are the words of a palace preparing for a ceremony. And if there is one person who has been quietly, methodically preparing for that ceremony with an attention to detail and a sense of purpose that everyone around her has noticed, it is the woman who will one day be queen. If you are finding this story as meaningful as we believe it to be, please take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel. We tell royal stories the way they deserve to be told, with depth, with care, with the respect your attention deserves. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss what we bring you next. We will be here every step of the way through one of the most consequential chapters in the history of the British crown. Now, let us talk about Catherine. In January 2026, Radar Online broke a story that was quietly extraordinary. Citing palace insiders, the publication revealed that Princess Catherine, the Princess of Wales, the woman who will one day be Queen Catherine, is already in charge of planning her husband's coronation. She has been for months, as Yahoo Entertainment reported on January 18th, and as the International Business Times confirmed on January 14th, Catherine has taken a leading role in shaping what the coronation of King William V will look and feel like. Multiple sources described her as front and center in the planning. One palace source told Radar Online that she's quietly and carefully planning every detail, working with a contemporary mindset and budget-conscious approach that stands in deliberate contrast to the nearly $100 million spent on Charles and Camilla's coronation in May 2023. That contrast is intentional. It is also deeply personal. William and Catherine lived through the public backlash that followed the 2023 coronation, a ceremony of undeniable magnificence, but one that cost British taxpayers an extraordinary sum at a moment when millions of those same taxpayers were struggling with a cost of living crisis that had squeezed household budgets to the breaking point. As Radar Online's March 2026 investigation reported, the couple have privately vowed to scale back significantly. A source told Radar Online that they won't want anything as ostentatious and have committed to using roughly half the budget. They're committed to modifying the monarchy and being less frivolous with taxpayer money, the source added. The estimated budget for William's coronation, as Radar Online and MSN both reported on March 26, 2026, is approximately $50 million, half of what his father spent. A meaningful signal, delivered not through a press release, but through the quiet arithmetic of planning decisions already underway. But what Catherine is building is not merely a smaller version of what came before. It is, if the people describing it are to be believed, something genuinely new. Something that respects the ancient weight of the ceremony while acknowledging, without apology, the world in which it will take place. The coronation of a British monarch is one of the most deliberately constructed rituals in Western civilization. Every garment has a history, Every object has a meaning. Every moment in the order of service has been refined across centuries until it carries the compressed significance of 1,000 years of institutional memory. The super tunica, the gold silk vestment that dates to the Byzantine court, tradition and that has been worn at coronations for generations, speaks of the king's role as a figure who bridges the sacred and the secular. The imperial mantle, the heavy gold cloak bearing the rose of England, the thistle of Scotland, the leek of Wales, and the shamrock of Ireland, is not decorative. It is documentary. It is a visual argument stitched in gold thread that the kingdom it represents is unified, ancient, and enduring. William will wear these vestments. He will hold the scepter with cross, which houses within its golden shaft the Cullinan 1 diamond, at 530 carats, the largest colorless cut diamond in the world. He will hold the sovereign's orb, the golden globe surmounted by a cross that has rested in the hands of every English monarch since Charles II in 1661. These objects were present at the coronations of George VI, Elizabeth II, and Charles III. They will be present at the coronation of William V. They form a chain of continuity so long that it disappears into the distance of history. But the coronation of King William V will not be purely a repetition. Because this couple has a vision of what the monarchy should be in 2026 and beyond. And that vision shapes every choice they are making. Author Andrew Loney, whose 2025 book entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York examined the institutional pressures now bearing down on the crown, told Channel 4 that the palace has quietly entered a transitional period. He described William as much more ruthless than his father in protecting the institution and noted that William can see the huge reputational damage that's been done. Crisis consultant Mark Borkowski, speaking to The Independent, was equally direct. The pressure on William to communicate what the royal family is going to be over the next 50 years, Borkowski said, falls squarely on his shoulders. William knows this, Catherine knows this, and the planning they are doing is the planning of two people who understand the weight of what they are about to carry and who have chosen to carry it consciously, deliberately, without pretense. Let us talk about what that means for those who will no longer be at the center of power. Because no account of this transition can be honest without addressing the question that has hovered over the palace for years. What happens to those who built their presence in the shadow of Charles's reign when the reign of William begins? The Radar Online investigation published on March 26, 2026, contains one of the most precise answers to that question that any royal source has offered on the record. Camilla is less involved in the big picture decisions, the source said as William and Catherine's power grows. They don't want her wading in. And the source was direct about the history that shapes that position. Camilla has a poor relationship with Kate, but even more so with William, who's never really cared for his stepmother. This is not a secret. It is not a tabloid invention. It is a documented reality of the royal family's internal dynamics that was placed on the public record by Prince Harry himself in his memoir Spare, published in January 2023, and corroborated by palace sources to outlet after outlet since. William and Harry wrote, urged their father not to marry Camilla. The phrase, wicked stepmother, appeared in print, written by a man who had lived in the same household. That dynamic did not disappear when William and Camilla exchanged diplomatic smiles at official occasions. It went underground. And what is happening in 2026, if the sources are accurate, is that it is emerging again. Not as personal animosity, but as institutional architecture. Under King William, royal experts have consistently predicted that Camilla will hold the title of Queen Dowager. Not Queen. Not Queen Consort. The formal title given to the widow of a king when the new monarch is not her son. Royal expert Victoria Howard, writing for Good Housekeeping and quoted by MSN as recently as April 2026, predicted she will be styled as Dowager Queen Camilla, a title that carries considerably less institutional power than the Queen Consort role she currently holds. Royal expert Joe Little has been equally clear. Every aspect of her public and private life, he has said, will be reviewed by the new king. The decisions about her staff, her diary, her duties, her access to royal residences, all of it will pass to William. All of it will be reconsidered. She has, in all likelihood, understood this for some time. The February 2026 transfer of Mill House, her beloved Wiltshire retreat, to her children's representatives, as reported by Hello Magazine and Royal Central, is a decision made by a woman who is thinking carefully about her own future. She is not waiting. She is planning. And that planning tells its own quiet story about what she expects the future to look like. For those at even greater institutional distance, for Andrew, now stripped of his royal titles following the events of late 2025 and early 2026, and for Harry and Meghan, whose departure from working royal life in January 2020 placed them permanently outside the ceremonial structure of the crown, the arrival of King William V represents a conclusion rather than a transition. They will be present as private individuals, as family in the biological sense of the word. But they will have no function in the ceremony. They will hold no place in the procession of power. William's coronation, when it comes, will be a ceremony about the future of the institution, and its architecture will reflect with quiet precision who belongs to that future and who does not. Please do stay with us to the end of this story, because what comes next is the part that will matter most to history. And if you have found this account valuable, we would ask you to share it with someone who cares about the royal family as much as you do. We read every comment. We are grateful for every person who finds us and stays. Now, let us speak about the legacy, because the story of what King Charles is preparing to do is, at its deepest level, a story about what kind of king he turned out to be. When Charles came to the throne in September 2022, there were serious and reasonable questions about whether he was the right person for the moment. Not because his personal qualities were in doubt, his intelligence, his commitment, his decades of preparation were beyond question, but because his personal history had created fractures in the public's relationship with the crown that some believed might never fully heal. The story of his marriage to Diana, the years of Camilla, the very public unraveling of a family that was supposed to represent stability. These were not small things. They were the defining royal story of the late 20th century. And they meant that Charles arrived on the throne already carrying a weight that his mother, for all her own challenges, had never been required to carry. What he chose to do with that weight is what his legacy will be made of. He moved quickly on Andrew. In late 2025, as reported by Radar Online, and confirmed across multiple outlets including People and Yahoo Entertainment, he stripped his brother of every royal title and honor following the emergence of emails linking Andrew to Jeffrey Epstein. He evicted Andrew from Royal Lodge, the 30-room Crown Estate mansion Andrew had occupied for years. When Andrew was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office in February 2026, the palace issued an unprecedented statement promising the authorities full and wholehearted support and cooperation. That is not the language of a family closing ranks. It is the language of a king deciding that the institution matters more than family loyalty. For a man who has always prioritized family, it was an act of remarkable institutional courage. He moved on Harry and Meghan as well, not with anger, but with the quiet finality of a man who understands that the crown is not a club with open membership. Their absence from working royal status has been translated, in the planning documents that insiders describe, into an absence from ceremonial function. They will not participate in the coronation of William V. That decision, made calmly and structurally, closes a chapter that consumed the monarchy for half a decade. He moved, too, on the question of the Duchy of Cornwall and the private estates, Balmoral, Sandringham, the vast economic engines of royal life, ensuring that the transfer of those resources to William was not just legally complete, but strategically sound. He wanted his son to have the financial independence to implement a new vision of monarchy without needing to fight for resources that should simply be his. And through all of this, through the cancer treatments and the state banquets and the overseas tours and the family crises, he appears to have been doing something else, something that the sources closest to him describe with a consistency that is hard to dismiss. He has been preparing, quietly and deliberately, to let go. A senior courtier told Rob Shooter in March 2026 that when Charles steps back, it will be entirely on his terms. That phrase, on his terms, is the key to understanding everything. Because what distinguishes what Charles is reportedly preparing from the abdication crisis of 1936 is precisely that element of conscious, purposeful choice. Edward VIII abdicated to escape a burden he never wanted. Charles, if these reports are accurate, would be stepping back to fulfill the deepest obligation of a man who has spent his entire life in service to an institution he loves, not fleeing the crown, passing it on. There is something deeply moving about that distinction if you allow yourself to feel it. This is a man who waited 73 years for this job, who was told implicitly and explicitly that the one thing required of him was to wait. And who waited? And who then, when the crown finally came to him, found himself in a body that was fighting against itself and in a family that was struggling under the weight of accumulated scandal, and who appears to have decided, with the moral seriousness that has always defined him at his best, that the greatest service he could render to the institution he loves was not to hold on, but to hand over. The coronation of King William V and Queen Catherine, whenever it comes, whether this summer as some insiders predict, or in the months that follow, will be a ceremony shaped by the decisions of the man who came before. The budget it costs will be a reflection of Charles's insistence that monarchy must earn public trust rather than assume it. The streamlined family that appears on that balcony will be a reflection of Charles's hard choices about who belongs in the working life of the crown. The regalia that Catherine, wears will carry within it a connection to Queen Elizabeth II that speaks to continuity, to legitimacy, to the unbroken thread of a dynasty navigating its own transformation with grace. And the man who will not be wearing the crown that day will be watching from somewhere quiet. Highgrove, perhaps, where the gardens he has tended for decades are at their most beautiful in summer, with the knowledge that he did what needed to be done, that he looked at the institution he devoted his life to and had made the hardest, most loving, most consequential choice a sovereign can make. That he chose the crown over himself. There is one more person in this story who deserves to be named clearly before we close, because every account of what is being planned inside the palace keeps returning to her. Not William. Not Charles. Her. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, is 75 years old. She performed more than 430 official engagements in 2024, as Hello Magazine documented in January 2026, making her the hardest working member of the royal family by a considerable margin. She has been patron or president of more than 300 organizations. She has never sought the spotlight. She has never courted publicity. She has simply worked with a consistency and a competence that has made her, in the words of body language expert Darren Stanton speaking to PureWow in March 2026, one of the two royals who represent the stronghold of the monarchy. The other is William. In the transition that is being prepared, Anne is not a peripheral figure. She is, according to every insider account, the institutional backbone of the process. She knows the precedents. She knows the protocols. She knows what worked and what failed in previous transitions, because she was there for them. Her role as the bridge between the outgoing king and the incoming sovereign is not ceremonial. It is operational. She is the one person in the family whom both Charles and William trust completely, and she is the one person whose presence in this process guarantees, more than any formal document or legal instrument, that it will be done properly. When the cameras turn toward Westminster Abbey for the coronation of King William V and Queen Catherine, the world will see a ceremony that is smaller and more modest than Charles's coronation, but more serious, more intentional, more clearly aligned with the realities of a monarchy that must justify its existence in every generation, not simply assume it. They will see a couple who have been preparing for this moment not for months, but for their entire adult lives, shaped by the education of public service and by the private education of watching everything that can go wrong when a royal family loses its way. They will see, standing somewhere in the procession, a 75-year-old woman in her ceremonial robes, making sure every detail is right, because that is what she has always done and because that is what this moment requires. And somewhere outside the frame, not in the procession, not on the balcony, not in the formal structures of a ceremony that is no longer his, somewhere in the quiet of a garden he loves, surrounded by the things he built when the world was not watching, a former king will know that he gave the crown something more valuable than a long reign. He gave it a clean beginning. That, in the end, is what all of this is about. Not scandal, not crisis, not the dramatic vocabulary of palace intrigue that fills so many headlines. It is about a man, 77 years old, who chose duty over comfort and institution over ego, who decided, in the most private part of himself, that the greatest thing he could do for the crown was to step back while he was still strong enough to do it gracefully. History will argue about many things. It will argue about the scandals of his era, about the choices he made and the choices he deferred. But if the picture described by those closest to the palace reflects what is actually happening, it will also record this, that in 2026, a king looked at the institution he loved and made the decision that no British monarch had made willingly in nearly 90 years, and that he made it not out of defeat, but out of a profound and hard-won understanding of what service actually means. The gates of Buckingham Palace have always been heavy. But as the era of William and Catherine begins, something in the way they open feels different. Not like a closing, like a beginning, a considered, prepared, deeply serious beginning, offered by a father to a son, and by a king to a crown that outlasts all of them. We will keep following every development as it comes. If this story moved you, if it gave you something to sit with today, please leave your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. And if you have not already subscribed to this channel, please do so now. It is the single most valuable thing you can do to support the work that makes stories like this one possible. Every subscription tells us that the depth and the care we put into this reporting matters to someone. And it does. You matter to us. The question we leave you with today is this. If King Charles does step back, if the summer brings with it the coronation that palace insiders are already preparing for, how will you remember his reign? Will you remember the scandals and the struggles? Or will you remember the man who, in his final act as king, did the hardest thing a sovereign can do? Will you remember the moment Charles III did the unthinkable, and in doing so, may have saved the crown? We will be watching, and so will you.